Hey, let's draft a skirt. Here's what you're going to need to draft your skirt. You're going to want to follow along in your textbook, page 48, 49, 50. You're going to need an L-square ruler, a hip stick, your clear gridded ruler, and a pencil. I'm using a Sharpie, so it shows up on the camera. All right, so you're going to start off on page 48 through 50, and you're going to fill in the blanks like we did on all our other drafting. You're referencing the measurements on page 36 of your textbook. There are a few things that I am changing from the textbook drafting. We are going to be changing the dart intake on the front skirt. Instead of 1.25 inches total, we're only going to be doing 1 inch, okay? Our side hip depth, I'm going to be increasing it a little bit. And I'll explain that to you in class, why I'm choosing to do that. So follow along with the measurements that I say, not necessarily what is in your textbook, okay? All right, you are going to want a piece of soft pattern paper that is at least 20 inches wide. We're going to start off by building the framework for our skirt. Now, our skirt sloper is essentially a pencil skirt, very simple. Pencil skirts are pretty much rectangles that have a tiny bit of shaping above the hips to bring the circumference in around the waist. So our framework is essentially going to be a rectangle. And our skirt sloper, while our bodice was drafting for the waist up to the high shoulder point, our skirt drafting is going to be the waist down. Okay. We're going to be doing the front and the back at the same time, unlike the bodice where we did them separately. We're going to be kind of developing them, the drafting for both of them at the same time. So, all right, let's start off with our skirt length. This is going to be our A to B measurement, and I am just choosing 24 inches. The way I came about this was I measured our size 10 dress forms, and from the waist down to about the knee is about 24 inches. Nice even number. And it happens to be the length of our L-square ruler. You're welcome. So, in the middle of our paper, I want you to draw a line from left to right. Put a tick mark on either end. That's 24 inches apart. By your right hand, I want you to label that A. By your left hand, I want you to label that B. Now, A, this is kind of near our waist. B is sort of near our hem. So, the next line we want to develop is going to be from A, our waist, down to our hip depth, okay? So A to C, we are going to measure from A to the left 8 inches. I am going to get my clear gridded ruler out for this. Line 8 up with A and measure towards the left. Give myself a cross mark and label this C. Okay? From A, furthest away from us on our paper, we are going to measure from A over, this is going to be our back hip arc, okay? So we're developing the framework for the back section of our skirt. I want you to take your L-square ruler. You're going to line one edge of it up with this center line you created. And the other edge is lined up with A. You are going to measure from A, furthest away from you, to D. That is going to be 10 1/8 inches. Remember, I want you to really get your head up on top of your ruler. So anytime you see my big, beautiful head come into the camera, that should trigger you that, hey, I need to get up on top of my ruler and really work on accuracy, okay? So again, A, measure out 10 1/8 inches furthest away from you on the paper, and we'll label this D. Remember, our skirt is mostly a rectangle. So I want you to come from A, I want exactly what you did here, I want you to do that at C and at B. So you're gonna line this edge of your ruler up with your first line you drafted. This edge is in alignment with C, and you're gonna measure out 10 1/8 inches. And do the same thing here at B. I'm gonna go back and recheck that all of these are 10 1/8 inches. Yes. I want you to label this D, E, and F. Take your L-square ruler and you are going to connect all of these points and label that line center back. All right, last thing we need to do for the framework on the back skirt is start at E. I want you to measure to the right up towards the waist, but we are only going to be measuring up 7 7/8 inches. This is gonna get you really close to D, but not quite. I want you to measure 7 7/8 inches and label that G. Cross out D. G should be 1/8 of an inch away from where D was, okay? This is gonna be the new waist level on our center back, but we'll deal with that later once we get the rest of the waist done. Now we need to build the framework for the front of our skirt. Now this is gonna be closest to you on your piece of paper. We have center back. This is sort of like our side seam. And then we're gonna build the framework for the front closer to us. So we're gonna start out up here at A. We're gonna measure towards us. We're gonna square a line from this side seam line towards us, 9 5/8 inches. And then you're gonna square a line out towards you, 9 5/8 inches. And label this H. Again, we're gonna do the same thing at C and at B, squaring a line out from our side seam line, 9 5/8 inches. We're gonna label this H, I, and J. Now I want you to measure and make sure that these are all 9 5/8 inches out from your side seam line. Nice. Once you've checked your measurements, I want you to connect all three with a line and label it center front. So you should have center front, side seam, center back, waist, hip, and hem. Now, we're gonna go and do what we did in activity 1, and we're gonna check and make sure that these lines are actually perpendicular to this side seam line. So if you remember how we did that, you're going to crease your paper right here on the side seam. Make sure you get it really accurately creased. You're gonna take your awl, make sure it's folded exactly how it's creased. You're gonna come out far on this line, poke a hole through all of them. Now, when you unfold your paper, you should be able to see that where your awl poked through is right on the line on both sides. If your awl marks are not even touching this line, you need to go back and re-square these lines. You wanna make sure you got this all squared before you move on at all, okay? So make sure everything's squared, and then we'll continue on. Let's continue with drafting our skirt. So we've developed the framework here. This is gonna be the front skirt, this is going to be the back skirt. They are touching right at the side seam, and that's okay. The framework is for the back and for the front is the widest measurement that we need on the front and the back, plus a little bit of ease added. That measurement is our hip. Our hips are the widest part of our size 10 dress forms. Our waists get a little bit smaller, so here's what we're going to do. Up here along our waistline, we are going to draft our back waist arc. Now, this is our back waist arc measurement, plus we're gonna add 1/4 inch of ease and 2 inches for a dart intake. So we have 8 7/8. That is our measurement. So we are going to measure from D, sorry, I had you cross this out earlier, but we're measuring from this corner, we're measuring towards A, 8 7/8 inches. Give yourself a cross mark and label it K. I want you to go at K, and I want you to square a line up and down about 1 inch on either side of your waistline. So really get one of these small red lines on your ruler in alignment with this waistline, so then you know you're getting this guideline squared up and down at K. Now, we are going to measure again from D, coming towards us 3 1/4 inches. Now, if you remember on our bodices, from our center line over to our first dart leg was 3 1/4 inches. We are doing that exact same thing here. So we're measuring from our center line, 3 1/4 inches, and giving ourselves a cross mark for our first dart leg. I want you to label this L. Listen carefully. I am going to give you, we're gonna mark our dart legs. So on the back, we have 2 darts on the waistline. On the front, we are also going to have 2 as well. I am going to give you the distances between these dart legs, and then you are going to go ahead and mark them. So this is our first dart leg. We want 1 inch, and then we're gonna make another cross mark. Then we want 1¼ inches. And we're gonna put another cross mark. Then we're going to do another 1 inch and another cross mark. Okay, so you should have from your center back line 3¼ inches over to L, and then a 1 inch gap with another cross mark, an 1¼ inch gap with another cross mark, and then a 1 inch gap and another cross mark. So between this cross mark and K, you should be getting about 2¼ inches. Now we're going to do the same thing over here on our front waist. We're going to develop our waist arc. So that is 7⅛ inches. Remember, I am changing the dart intake here. So we're going to take 7⅛, add a little bit of ease, and then add 1 inch for a dart intake. That will give us a measurement of 8�3/8. So I want you to start here at H, which is our center front line. Measure towards A, 8�3/8 inches. Label this M. And again, I want you to kind of square up and down. Again, we want the darts on our skirt to line up with the darts on our bodice if we were to sew the two together at the waistline. So we want our first dart leg to be 3¼ inches from our center front. So we're going to measure over from H away from us 3¼ inches and label that N. Again, we're going to end up having 4 cross marks because the front has 2 waist darts. So 1, 2, 3, 4 dart legs. So here's what you're going to do. You want this to be 3¼ inches over to your first dart leg. You're going to have a 1/2 inch to the next dart leg, 1¼ inch to the next dart leg, and then another 1/2 inch, okay? So that's gonna look like this. 1/2 inch, 1¼ inch, 1/2 inch. The remainder that you should have over here will be about 2 3/4, 2 7/8. So we've gotten our waist darts kind of marked along our waist. This is, I want you to look here at K and M. So remember, this is our back skirt, this is our front skirt. This is the side seam for both, but not only do we add, our skirt is going to be a rectangle from the hip down, but above the hip, we need to add a lot of shaping so that we can bring the fabric in to match the circumference of our waist. Not only are we doing that by intaking some darts here, but we're also going to be curving the side seam from the hip up. And we're going to be curving on either side of this side seam up to K and then up to M. I want you to take your hip stick ruler, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to have the curvy part up here towards M and the straighter part down here on the side seam. Now, I have changed this measurement we're doing the side hip depth. So we're going to be curving from C up towards K and then up towards M. And we're looking at these guidelines that we've made on K and M. I want this measurement to be 8 3/8 inches. Thank goodness our hip stick has measurements on it. here's what I want you to do. I want you to put your pencil right on the intersection of the side seam and the hip line. Put the end of your pencil right there. I want you to slide this hip stick up until 8 3/8 is right next to your pencil lead. And then pivot this over until the end of your ruler hits somewhere along M, okay? So again, 8 3/8 down here at the hip level and the side seam. And then you want it to curve up and you want the 0 to hit somewhere along this guideline you made at M. It is most definitely going to be above the waistline that you have developed here, okay? So give yourself a cross mark right where that zeroes out and then draw in your curve, okay? And I want to see the intersection where your side seam curves into that M guideline. Label that Q. Now you're gonna do the same thing over here on the back skirt. You're just gonna flip your hip stick over. Same measurement, 8 3/8. I'm gonna put my pencil lead right here at the hip and side seam where they intersect. I am gonna slide my ruler until 8 3/8 is right where my pencil lead is. And then I'm gonna pivot until the 0 on my ruler hits somewhere along this K guideline. Okay? Right like that. I'm gonna give myself a cross mark right where that 0 is. I'm gonna fill in that side seam curve. Label this P. Now, what P and Q are, this is where our side seam meets our waist, okay? So what I want you to do is I am going to take a pencil now because I'm going to fill in the waistline. But this is very preliminary waistline. So I'm doing it with a pencil because I can't erase a Sharpie, and I know that I'm most certainly going to have to redo this later on in my drafting, but I want to get something drafted in for the waistline. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start on my skirt front. I'm going to use my hip stick. I want the sort of straighter end of my hip stick over here towards center front, and the more curved end over here near Q. And I am going to put my pencil lead down where center front meets my waist at H, okay? I'm gonna put my pencil lead there. I'm gonna slide my ruler along that until, the curve of the ruler just goes perfectly from this straight waistline and curves up perfectly to hit Q. You do not want your curve to like dip down right here. You very much want this to be squared off from center front and then just to naturally curve up to Q. So very lightly with your pencil, fill in that curve, okay? You're gonna do the same thing over here on the skirt back, but you're going from G, you want it to be a very squared off line at G and then curve up to P, okay? So you're gonna do that by flipping your hip stick so the straighter end is over here towards G and the more curvy side is over here at P. I'm gonna put my pencil lead down at G, slide my ruler until the curve nicely hits up here at P. Fill that in, okay? You can do that very lightly with your pencil. We'll almost certainly be fixing that and refining that line later in our drafting. All right, let's fill in some darts. This is going to be our skirt front, the side that is closest to us that has the smaller dart intakes. What I want you to do is use your clear gridded ruler, and I want you to find the center between these first two dart legs, okay? So since the dart intake is 1/2 inch, I'm going to line up the 1/4 inch line on my ruler with the first dart leg. Make sure another of my lines on my ruler is lined up with my waistline here. And then I am going to square a line down 3.5 inches and give myself a cross mark. I am going to measure down 3.5 inches and give myself a cross mark. That intersection is going to be my dart point. Let's do the same thing for this next dart. Find the center between these two dart legs, square a line down, give yourself a cross mark at 3.5 inches. Now we're going to do the same thing over here on our skirt back. These dart intakes are the 1 inch gaps that you have here. We're going to square a line down the center of that and then give ourselves a cross mark at 5.5 inches. So the darts on the back are longer than the darts on the front. They're also wider. The reason for that is we have a booty on our back, so our butt sticks out more and our waist has to come in, which means our waist has to come in more, which means we need more of a dart intake. Also, the fullness of our booty is a little bit lower than the fullness of our abdomen on the front, which means we have to bring the darts down a little bit further. So they release the fabric down lower for the booty than we do on the front, where we release the fabric a little bit higher up so it leaves room for the abdomen here, okay? So again, find the center of these dart legs, square a line down 5.5 inches. This cross mark will be our dart point. Now I want you to do what we did for skill 1 and draw in your dart legs, okay? So these intersections are your dart points. These cross marks up here are the ends of your dart legs. So remember, I'm gonna go in with a pencil, but remember to use your pencil tip right at that intersection. Bring your ruler up to your pencil tip and pivot it until it is in alignment with your dart leg. Draw it in, get your pencil tip back at the dart point, pivot your ruler, draw it in. We want our dart legs converging right there at that intersection and to definitely hit right here at our waistline. So do this for all your darts. All right, so just like we did in skill 1 on our dart activity, we are going to go and fold all of our darts, okay? And that's why I told you to do your waistline in very lightly in pencil, because once we fold our darts, we are going to be re-blending our waistline to make sure it's nice and smooth. Remember, our vertical darts always fold towards the center, meaning these darts, we want the intake to fold towards center front. These darts, we want the intake to fold towards center back. So we have our front dart legs folded, and you see that it's nice and three-dimensional. Let's fold our back darts. We want the intake to go towards center back, so we're gonna start at center back. So once you fold your darts, you always want to go in and refine and blend that shape, because typically what happens is you'll see you get some sort of either peaks or valleys. And I mean, it's not terrible, but you'll see that we're getting kind of this angular shape. And we really want this to be a nice, smooth blend. So I'm gonna take either my hip stick, or where is my French curve? I'm gonna take my hip stick and my French curve. These are two tools that you can utilize to help blend nice curves. And it's really all about figuring out which one will work best for the curve you have. I'm gonna start off with using my French curve. This bit of angular area, there's kind of angles right where we folded our darts. I just want to smooth that out. I'm going to turn this to the side so I can get a better look at it. I'm going to use sort of the fairly straight part of my French curve, and I see that when I hold it up right here, it kind of matches my line over here on either side of my darts, and it will just help create this nice smooth blend instead of these kind of angles that I'm getting down here. So now I'm going to use my Sharpie, whereas before I used a pencil lightly. That's why, because now we're going in and refining our shape. I'm gonna go ahead and use my Sharpie so you can see it really well. And I'm going to blend that in. And I'm going to fill in the rest of my waistline as well. So do you see how this is just much more refined and blended and smooth? This is our actual waistline, okay? Now, this is our center back and our side seam. I want you to do the same thing on your back waist. And remember, this upper line right here, you can go ahead and erase that. That is not our waist. We are going from G down here. And again, it's not super terrible, but I'm getting a bit of an angle and I just want to smooth that out. Do you see how my two lines do not match up? Like this side is a bit higher, this side is a bit lower. We want to equalize that when we create our blend. All right, so hopefully you can get your waistlines blended smoothly. The last step before you untape all of these is to cut along your waistline while these are taped so you can get the shaping for the edge of the dart intake. Now you can go ahead and use your tracing wheel and trace over it and then fill in that perforated line. I prefer just to use my scissors and cut, but you can do whatever you feel most comfortable with. So once you've figured out your waistline, what we need to do is this little area right here. This is the side seam for our front skirt. This curved line is the side seam for our back. All of this in between is just negative space. So this is the side seam for each of them. So what we need to do is separate them at the side seam and cut out this negative space. So you can go ahead and cut all the way around. You should have your two skirt drafts cut out. You should have figured out the waist shaping, the shaping of the dart intakes. And when you connect them here at the side seams, the side seams on either side from the hip up should kind of curve out, okay? There should be a little bit of negative space here. I'm gonna turn them this way so that center front is closest to me. I am going to write side seam here just to help me orient myself. I already have hip here on the front. I'm gonna write hip here on the back as well. So we're gonna go and I want you to label these the exact same way that we did for our half scale slopers in skill 1. So you can get those out to kind of figure out how to add your markings, your grain lines, and your labels to all of these. Here are the labels for each of them. Again, we're defaulting to what we did with the bodices where the front is going to be cut one on fold, so there's no seam in the front, but the back is going to be cut two so that we can have an opening to add a zipper or whatnot so we can get this actually on our human or our dress form, okay? So the back is going to be cut two, the front is cut one on fold. I want you to go through and add your grain lines and your markings, which on these skirts is going to be, you're gonna put punch holes at your dart points, circle them in red, and you're gonna add all of your notches, which will be at your dart legs and will be at the hip level on the side seam. This is how your skirt slopers should be labeled. You should have grain lines. You should be marking the centers on both, punch hole with red circles at the dart points, notches on dart legs, and at the hip level on the side seams. Now, the last step is that we need to walk these. Remember, everything that gets sewn to one another needs to be walked so that once we actually go to sew it, we know that our pattern is true and correct and that it'll sew together properly. So when we sew our skirt together, many people get this confused and they want to walk the center to the center. No, no, no. What gets sewn together is our front gets sewn to our back at the side seam. So you have to walk this. What I want you to do is I want you to line up from the hem to the hip level. This is a straight line and it should be in alignment. You want to make sure that your notches are in alignment and that your hems are in alignment. Get your notches in alignment, your hip levels lined up. If one of your skirt pieces is slightly longer than the other, trim them so they are the same length. And then what I want you to do is I want you to walk these curves together all the way up to the waist. Now, what you should find is that they are the same length because we had the same measurement when we did that. Mine is just a hair off. My front piece is just a hair longer. So what I'm going to do, and it's within it's like a 32nd of an inch off, but I'm really accurate. And so I am just going to trim this little bit off. Now, if yours are off by 1/8 of an inch or 1/4, you might choose to figure out which one is actually 8 3/8. You might have to add to the shorter side if the longer side is 8 3/8. The shorter side is 8 3/8. That's the measurement we want. You can just trim the longer side down. So I just trimmed up here, tapered it into my waistline. Now I'm going to walk them again. Yes, they are exactly the same length. Another thing I want to do is I want to line these up here right at the top of the side seam and see, does my waist blend smoothly? I'm not really looking for a deep valley. I am just looking for a nice, smooth blend. And you really only have to line them up that top 1/2 inch to 1 inch or so. I'm happy with that. That is a nice, smooth blend to me. So I'm gonna leave it. All right, you've gotten your skirt drafted, way to go. Another step that we need to do is with our basic pattern set, we have our bodice, our skirt, and our sleeve. We sew the darts for each of those, and then we get our bodice put together, we get our skirt put together, we get our sleeve put together, all separately. And then what we do is we sew the skirt to the bodice at the waist, and we set the sleeve into the bodice. So we also need to go and walk the waistline of this with the waistline of our bodice, just to make sure that they are true and they're going to sew together well. So get out your bodice drafts that we did earlier and meet me back here. Now, these get sewn together at the waistline. We need to make sure that they're true and that they walk and they'll be able to sew together correctly. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our front bodice with our front skirt and our back bodice with our back skirt. Set your back bodice aside and you're just gonna take your skirt front and your skirt bodice. Now, these get sewn together at the waist. Our bodice only has one waist dart while our skirt has two. Essentially what's gonna happen is we'll sew the darts on each separately before combining the bodice to the skirt. This one dart is going to align with this first dart closest to center front on our skirt. This dart over here does not align with anything, but that's okay. We really just wanna make sure that these two are going to align with each other. What I'm gonna have you do is fold your waist darts on your skirt. All right, so I have my skirt darts taped shut. So now I just have one, this is my actual waist measurement. Now for my front bodice, I'm not going to tape the waist dart shut. I am just going to walk it along this one. I'm gonna take my front bodice and I am going to flip it over so it's right sides together with my skirt. Now I want the center front at the waist. I want to find both of those corners and I want to align them. You're going to be doing what we did in skill 1. We've done this a few times now where you create pivot points and you walk these curves. Now these are slight curves and so you just want to slowly walk them over until you come to both dart legs. Now, these should align with one another because our measurement from center front to our first dart leg was 3 1/4 inches. Mine are in really good alignment. You can see that the notches from the dart legs line up perfectly with one another. If yours are not quite in alignment, you'll want to go back and measure from center front over to your dart legs, whichever one is actually 3 1/4 inches, that is the one that's correct, and you'll want to kind of change the other one. And what you can do, if you ever have to change anything on a pattern, is you could always, like say this one we're off, you could just erase your lines, tape a piece of paper here, redraft where your dart leg needs to be and then blend your waist shape, okay? Hopefully it is in alignment when you walk from center front over to your first dart leg. We need to skip over this dart intake, bring this dart leg over to here instead, and we want to continue walking the rest of our waist. Until we come to the end. Now what I'm seeing is that my skirt is just a tiny bit wider than my bodice. When I walk the rest of my waist, I find that my skirt is just a tiny bit wider than my bodice is. So what I am going to do is I am going to put a little tick mark on my skirt. And it's like, it's a 1/16 of an inch maybe. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shave that little bit off of my skirt so that my waistline on my skirt will match my waistline on my bodice. Now, if your bodice is slightly bigger, you can just shave a little bit off. If you're off by like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, you need to go back and check your measurements and find out which one is correct, because you might not need to like shave anything off. You might need to actually add something. So I'm gonna use the same hip stick that I did the first go around, and I'm just going to kind of shave that little bit off. As long as it's just a little bit, you should be okay. But if you're off by 1/4 of an inch or something, you need to go back and check your measurements. Now, I would recommend before you actually cut anything off like I just did, go back and make sure that your walking was accurate. And now when I walk them, they are exactly the same, okay? That's what we want. We're gonna do the same thing for our skirt waist and our bodice waist. We're gonna walk these two together. I am going to fold the darts on my skirt. Now, if you use magic tape for this, you should be able to easily peel it up and re-stick and re-tape your darts shut. That's what's so cool about magic tape. Okay, I got my skirt darts folded. I'm not going to fold the bodice dart. It's just easier for me when I have something completely flat that I can walk on the skirt that's kind of folded all wonky. And get that nice and flat. Now, again, what I'm gonna do is put my back bodice right sides together with my skirt. And right here at center back, I am going to align those corners and then walk. We want this first dart on the skirt to align with that first dart leg on the bodice. And then what we have to do is skip over this dart intake and then continue walking the rest of it. All right, find these center backs, align that corner, and we're going to walk these curves. Yay, I'm seeing that my first dart leg on my bodice is perfectly aligning with my first dart leg on my skirt. So what we need to do next is skip over this dart intake, bring this dart leg over where we left off on our skirt, and continue walking the rest of this. Waist. I like to, when I come upon my second dart, I like to kind of put a little tick mark on my bodice waist just so I know where it was. Now I'm getting the exact same thing where I have just a tiny little sliver over here on the skirt that's a little bit wider than my bodice is. Again, it is like a 1/16 of an inch. It is so tiny. So I'm just gonna trim that off of this skirt. If yours is like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, you definitely need to go back and recheck your measurements and see which one is correct. Because if they're way off, you might find that the skirt is correct and you need to actually add to the waist, and I can help you do that. In my case, I'm just off by like a 1/16 of an inch, probably because I'm using a Sharpie. So I'm just gonna shave that off with my skirt. Obviously, you wanna go back and redo it again and again a few times just to make sure you're accurate. Yay. All right, so I've walked my bodices with my skirts. I did have to shave off a little bit here on my skirts. And since I did that, I wanna go back and make sure that the side seams on my skirts will still walk, since I did make a little bit of a change. Yay, looks great. All right, once you have walked your skirts with your bodices along the waistline and you've made any adjustments needed and you've re-walked your skirt pieces, you are finished. Make sure you have all of your correct labelings and markings and grain lines and whatnot, and you're done with your drafting your skirt.